So Damien Burton and I work for a company called Programmed. My question relates nothing to that at all. And the first one has no agenda, but the Perth is a city of about 2 million, although if the census went well last night we could probably confirm that, but assume it's going to be about that much. In a comparative sense across cities of the world of 2 million, would they have 5 universities? Would they have 1? Would they have 10? How do we compare? And the second one is a question as a father of an 18-year-old halfway through year 12, and also a watcher of movies where it seems in American culture it's very much in their norm to move out of home, go to college and university out of their location, whereas in Australia my sense is that's not the same. I'm wondering why that is different, and can we do more to attract people to Perth in that sense?
Who wants to have a go?
I'll answer the first one. I came from Scotland before coming to Perth, and Scotland has a population of about 5 million people, and it has about 20 universities. But I think the question is flawed in the sense that universities around the world very differently, hugely in size. If you look at, for example, a typical university in Scandinavia, it's on the order of 10,000 students. If you look at a typical university my university has 27,000 students. So it's not a question really of the number. I've heard many people in places I've gone to, and Scotland included, saying there are too many universities. The university would be much better if it was fewer universities. I think, again, that's a flawed argument, because if you look at the diversity of the universities we've got in Australia, that's one of the great strengths of this country. I think it's not really recognised. But our universities here in Western Australia have different visions, different missions. We cater for different types of students. And because of that diversity, we do a much better job than we would if you simply said that level of population merits this number of universities of that size. I think you can have all sorts of different universities. You can have niche specialist universities. The university I came from in Scotland only had 8,000 students. It specialised in science and engineering and business. That was doing a very valuable job in a city of Edinburgh, where the University of Edinburgh itself had maybe 30,000 students and was a great comprehensive. So my answer to your question is there is no set number, and you should celebrate the huge diversity we've got in this country. It's one of the jewels of Australia's higher education system.
Anybody else want to jump in quickly?
The second one I was going to... Are you going to have a go at that as well? That is a very interesting comment about why Australian students tend not to go too far away from home to university. And being new to Australia, I guess my observation would be around just the vastness of the country. Going to university from Western Australia to Melbourne is like going from London to Turkey or somewhere like that. So we're actually talking about quite a distance in terms of that. Having said that, I don't know why it would be that not so many students, perhaps beyond veterinary science and medicine, don't seek to come to Western Australia from other states to study. Northern Territories, for instance, attract more students from the eastern states, other eastern states, than Western Australia does. So there is something there about also that plays to Western Australia, and maybe it plays to what Debbie said earlier around the perceptions that there are about the distance but isolation and things which are not real in a sense that people perceive them. And maybe also the cost is somehow associated for that. Having said that, at Murdoch University, like other universities, we have accommodation on our campuses, and we have many domestic students. The majority of students on our campus are domestic students who are in that accommodation. It's obviously a very different experience in that your parents still live in the same city, but you actually have you're part of the university experience. So I don't know whether that answers your questions at all, but it is something that I've been particularly puzzling as well with someone who comes from outside Australia and looks at it. And maybe it's about the vastness.
I'd just add very briefly, I think it's an important observation. I think it is changing, but at the moment the traffic's one way. It's largely from states like Western Australia and Queensland to both the ANU and Melbourne, and there is quite a traffic that way. for the sector in Australia, we need much more movement, as much as we possibly can, supported by scholarships and things, because accommodation at universities' campuses is not cheap. But we do need to look at having as many students coming to Western Australia as we are losing from Western Australia to other states, and it comes back to some of my earlier comments.
Celia?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, historically it's always been the case in Australia. The majority of students, the vast majority compared with any other country, stay home, live at home to study while they study at university. It's also, and there's been some movement on that, and that Australian students take up less in past times the opportunity to study abroad or to go international for a period of time. Again, that's changing, but largely through the endeavours of the university. And just as a flippant aside, depending on whether your Year 12 is a male or female, and depending on whether we ever get the results of the most recent census, that of course is still ongoing, you're likely to have, if it's a him, home until he's about 27, latest ABS statistics. So if this was a goal to try and get your child out of the home earlier, sorry if he's a son.
It's not going to work.
Oh, good afternoon. Lisa Scapidi, the Lord Mayor of the city. Thank you for all of your comments. And Deborah, I would particularly like to acknowledge the comments you made about international students. But I think, Robert, you mentioned the great spirit of collaboration that does exist between the universities. But I wanted to ask each of the VCs, with that in mind, how do you each feel about contributing more to perhaps driving a more unified study destination and branding Perth accordingly? I look by comparison to Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney. In particular in Adelaide, I note the universities there each contribute about $300,000 a year to the equivalent of Study Adelaide. And I would just mention that I think that kind of initiative really does make a big difference to our visibility as a study destination, and benefits those international students that we're so keen to. We talk about the numbers are declining at the moment. The state currently, I think, gives about 1.32 million. The City of Perth, I'm proud to say, really recognises the importance of international students in our city as a key part of our strategy, and we've committed at the city to about $500,000 over 3 years. So I was just keen to get the feedback from the individuals.
I'm absolutely supportive, Lisa, and endorse your leadership and also the Minister's leadership. The Minister has led now 2 delegations, China and Vietnam last year, and Indonesia this year with the 5 universities. And I think, you know, both of those trips were certainly very successful. Obviously also acknowledge Lynn Beasley as the new chair of Study Perth. I'm certainly, from Curtin's perspective, very happy to contribute to a collaborative answer to this issue. We absolutely need to address it, and it's something, as I say, that can have an impact not only on our universities and the quality of what we're providing, both our domestic and our international students immediately, but more broadly on the state economy.
I might just pick up on that. And Mayor, I agree. And in fact, having been Vice-Chancellor in Western Australia for longer than any others, I think we're at a rare moment in time with people coming from interstate and some from other countries. Actually, most of you, apart from Deb and I, we're the only,
West Australia.
There's a rare thing going on that everybody is behind this, and the idea of actually combining, and this is what we mean by collegiality, and don't worry, we're still very competitive, but just in case the ACCC is here, but that idea of collegiality and wanting to engage in this. But one thing I would say, and I'm sure this is not what you were suggesting, we are, and I don't speak on behalf of any of them on this, but completely 100% supportive, and the Minister leading this and all the universities behind it, I do separate supportive from then saying, and we're willing to put in X amount of cash for it. Because one of the things that I would want to see first, and I'm pretty sure I speak on behalf of the others as well, we want a plan. We want to have as much ownership of this. We're not just going to funnel money into something on a whim or a hope. It's got to be, we think it's got to be collaborative, it's got to be tourism, it's got to be the City of Perth. You're all at the table at the moment, which is great, but till we've got this nutted out and what are we going to do, not going to put in $300,000 on another project pilot study that we get back papers on. It's got to be real. It's got to be tangible.
I'd like to, when I probably, as others have, when you come to Perth, and let me just be upfront from the start, this is the best move I ever made. I'm delighted to be in Perth. It's a fantastic place. But I found the approach to international students very confused. There were lots of players in it, and it wasn't quite clear to me whose role all of these, what their function really was, and how the universities work together. Now, I'm pleased to say, and I'm sure Paul's going to say something in a moment about accommodation in the centre, which we've all signed up to. But there's a lot of us, a lot of talk about how we can work together. And in a previous place I was, there was a city, it had 4 universities, and we did things, for example, like having a permanent reception based in the airport. We didn't each fund one, but if a student comes in, they want to feel welcomed, we could all contribute to it. That one person could be welcomed, directed to their... Those are tiny things, and you think, well, that's not significant. Actually, it's hugely significant. The welcome, the first thing you see when you come out of the airport, I don't know what to do, and suddenly there is a welcome from the universities of Western Australia. So those are the sort of things I think we're thinking about. But I would agree with Celia. We would definitely be interested in putting in resource if we were less confused about where the resource was going and what it would deliver. And just if I could get in a slight one, since we've got the mayor there, let's keep Edith Cowan's house in 31 Malcolm Street.
Yes.
Maybe I could just add to that. We haven't had an opportunity to meet yet, and I look forward to our meeting Mayor. But also recognising that the university's global brands are very important, and particularly the research collaborations, the very deep, meaningful research collaborations we have across the globe. And somehow, not just maybe think about putting an extra funding like 3,000K or something like that, but thinking more about how do we package that university brand into the world, and how do we play through our research collaborations, which are very deep in different parts of the world, and then leverage those for the international student recruitment and international education, and maybe have a more of a coordinated approach around that research endeavour as well. So I think we have a plenty to build on, in addition to having something like Study Perth, and in addition to having something like meeting the students at airport and so on, which are all important. But I think we have a sort of a higher element here as well, on which we should capitalise on as universities for benefit of Perth and Western Australia.
One last question, and the responses are going to have to be quick, or I'm going to get wound up by our sponsor.
Thank you, all of the Vice-Chancellors. It's been an excellent discussion. My name's Eleanor Douglas. My question is, David Thodey, the chair of the CSIRO, said recently at the Knowledge Nation Summit, actually, that 6 million Australians are going to require retraining in the next 10 years. So in Western Australia, that's sort of 625,000 people. Now, most people in this room have a bachelor's degree, and many have done postgraduate, but are our current training at the university level, are our current methods, structures, practices adequate to that absolutely transformational task, which is totally unlike anything that has happened in this economy in the last 50 or 100 years?
Well, I'll start, and it's a very good question. So, for example, if you think about the types of jobs that are going to develop in the future, we know that there are going to be tens of thousands of jobs required in the cybersecurity area, and we simply don't have those people. And at the moment. Now, the universities have the capacity, definitely, to produce those people, but I think we have to remember that we do have a problem with STEM background in Western Australia at all levels, and my main concern is really, you know, it might be great for you going into cybersecurity, but we really need to up your maths and science skills to allow you to do that. So rather than just retraining you for one industry, we do need to focus on STEM. Where are we going to get the physicists, the engineers, the cybersecurity people in the future? And it's the M in STEM that I'm particularly worried about.
Okay.
Can I
Couple
also,
more quick comments.
this point came up at a forum I was at a couple of weeks ago, and I think we get fixated when we address, because it is a really valid point, but we get fixated on the fact that universities, or I think we get this mindset that universities are simply training somebody for a particular profession. I don't think that actually that has ever been the specific and sole purpose of a university. Training somebody in a professional discipline so that they can be accredited to be in a profession, yes, and it's a fundamental aspect of all of us. But for the last decade, we know that students that we educate in one discipline are likely to have 10 or 15 jobs. But part of what we provide within a university education, and what we should be, is the ability to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
To be, I hate the word innovation, but to be innovative thinkers, to be flexible. Oh, I dispute that entirely. I have no maths and I think I'm pretty creative.
Generation who are going to take these new roles based on sort of liberal arts
We definitely
and
need
law sort of critical.
But no, we definitely need people with maths and science, absolutely. But not every person is suited to maths and science. And my biggest fear is that the more we emphasise this, we're forgetting that art, that creative industries, that all of those things that engage us as a society, that move our senses, that liberate our thoughts, that make us reflect, will be lost. So we absolutely need science and maths, and we need to build it without a doubt, but not at the expense of all of those other things that go to making up. So I don't think we disagree. It's just my point of emphasis here is let's not also forget those wider things.
I think what your question also speaks to, if I'm correct, is people already in the workforce and reskilling that workforce. And maybe I have many thoughts in my mind, but I'll just share one, which is about educational models. So when people are in the workforce, universities need to be much more flexible in terms of how they deliver education, and unbundling of learning, which we talk about already, which is about small bits of learning that people can very directly associate with what their goals are for their careers. And so to create your own degree, which is increasingly there. And also online and flexible delivery modes, I think, are very important. And we already know that the people who, for instance, study on MOOCs are people who already have degrees and are using that as a platform for retraining and repositioning themselves. So there's just a few ideas that I think universities are aware of, but what we need to do as universities is become much more nimble and flexible in our own operating models in order to truly capitalise on the opportunities that are there for that interface of workforce development and universities.
I'm now ignoring a sign which is telling me to wrap up. So, Paul, one last comment.
One last comment.
We'll
Eleanor, I think the biggest challenge for the circumstance you identify is actually not universities or other providers. I think we will all respond. I think the challenge comes back to what Steve said right at the outset about how education is paid for, a sharing of the cost between society through the taxpayer at present and the individual. The problem with the in-career retraining is that at present all the costs really reside with the individual rather than either society or the employer. Therefore, we are destined to massively underinvest in that, and so we need to rethink how we encourage and resource individuals and companies to facilitate that re-education or retraining.
So, thank you. We could go on for hours, and I suspect most people would stay, but it might be a disruption to the productivity of the city of Perth. So we will wind it up there.